Very strong, nga?
Arcadegeddon is best described as a live-service multiplayer roguelite looter shooter with light platforming elements. Since its release in 2022 as a PS Plus Essential game, the game has had a number of updates to improve functionality and gameplay. Due to Arcadegeddon being a live service game, it is hard to place the game in review. Do I consider the earlier versions of the game, or should I only review the game as is? For your viewing's sake, I will do a mix of both. But that won't stop my review potentially being outdated if the game changes in future updates. Oh, live service, praise be your corporate overlords. I love gaming. You would think that a game called Arcadegeddon would narrow in on arcade game design. Instead, it employs a standard and generic third-person looter shooter style of gameplay, banking on popular multiplayer trends. Mechanically, you can run and gun, jump, and slide your way to defeating enemies, completing objectives, and looting everything you can along the way. The gameplay is familiar and passable. However, after a few runs, you soon realize how shallow the gameplay is, and you forgot to put the milk back in the fridge. The initial setup of the game's plot got me hooked. You and your friends must defend the last standing arcade in town from being shut down by a mega corporation. To do this, you must enter Gilly's game, Arcadegeddon, in order to rid the corporate viruses plaguing it. While the premise is silly, I was genuinely intrigued as to how this story would unfold. However, like a cruel joke, the central plot is never developed after this point, leaving the player to continuously defend Gilly's arcade from a never-ending evil video game virus. This world is purgatory. Maybe if I buy something from Gilly's shop, it will advance the story. Microtransactions are plentiful in Arcadegeddon, your standard cosmetic skins galore. It is a shame that these are gated off as microtransactions. It's a bit hypocritical that the thematic crux of the game is standing up against evil corporations through rebellion, and then you are expected to bow down to corporate greed in the form of buying microtransactions. Paywalling cool, unique character and fashion designs sour its own strengths. Generally, the character designs have a punk edge to them. You don't see that too often. As you level up, you'll meet different crew leaders with their own identity, personality, and philosophy. This really reminds me of better games such as Jet Set Radio, where characters you meet along the way give different moods and vibes, providing scope and variety to the world. Similarly to Jet Set Radio, Arcadegeddon's music is daring. Electronic beats permeate your ears and adds to Arcadegeddon's unique identity. However, due to the looping nature of the game, some tracks will soon grate on your nerves. This is an unfortunate consequence of basing your gameplay on a repetitive looter-shooter game structure. On release, you had Adventure Mode, which was the main PvE mode, and a PvP mode. I'll save you the trouble, the PvP wasn't great. It felt tacked on and was never fleshed out. That left Adventure Mode as the go-to game mode to play solo or with friends. Blasting through levels, level up weapons, kill bosses, gain abilities, rank up to blast through more of the same levels, level up weapons, kill bosses, gain abilities, rank up until you reach the ceiling, where you cannot unlock much else. I found myself asking, why are we doing this again? Which is never a great sign. Updates to the game introduced new game modes such as Boss Rush and Horde Mode, which was welcomed, but the game would have benefited from this sooner if the player base hadn't dwindled as much as it did. I am in two minds about this game. You can see that Arcadegeddon's aesthetic has a clear vision to be a different kind of game, mixing a popular multiplayer genre with a fresh art direction. But it undercuts itself by relying too much on modern sensibilities to achieve this. I stepped away from the game. Arcadegeddon was now gathering digital dust. Until updates made it far easier to achieve some of the trophies in the game. There were bugged trophies on launch, so getting the Platinum Trophy was unobtainable. The game was later patched to fix this. Arcadegeddon was back on my radar. But before this, I casually chipped away at some of the trophies, knowing full well the platinum was out of reach. Get 500 kills with demolisher weapons. Get 500 kills with nanotech weapons. Collect 100,000 tickets. Destroy 500 crates. They really like the number 500. Get 500 kills with infernal weapons. Get 500 kills with militech weapons. Get 500 kills with zero cool weapons. Get 500 kills with surge weapons. Get 500 kills with each manufacturer type for good measure. On paper, it looks really grindy, and it sure was at times. But if you were going for other trophies like Surge Ahead, Boss of Bosses, and miscellaneous trophies, it didn't seem too bad. Now, I mentioned earlier that updates made it easier to get some trophies. Let me explain. Certain miscellaneous trophies required you to get a certain amount of kills at the same time with specific surge abilities. Sounds absolutely doable, right? Well, in the early versions of the game, you could not get that amount of enemies to spawn in at once if you were playing solo, because spawn rates were tied to the number of players in a game, which meant you had to do this online with at least 2 other players. To do this in a legitimate lobby was nigh impossible, since other players are killing the same enemies as you and not letting them group up. So, if I really wanted to get those trophies, I would have had to boost with other trophy hunters. I soon found out that in a recent update where they added the boss rush mode, I could get these trophies solo by fighting a certain boss, the Prince Data Demon, with a difficulty of 15. These are, without a doubt, the hardest trophies in the game, not because of the skill required to do them, but the hoops you had to jump through for the chance of getting enemies to spawn in the first place. The platinum killer for the game is a trophy called the Collector, which tasks you to collect 51 figurines. That doesn't sound bad. We've done worse with collectibles. So what gives? To get one figurine, you must defeat each of the 4 bosses in a single run. Given how bosses only spawned by you achieving combos, it meant that you had to grind for a boss to spawn, then kill it, then do it again until you completed a boss run, and a figurine would be yours. If you were quick about it, you could do all 4 bosses in 20 minutes. Quick maths. If it took on average 20 minutes to complete one boss run, 51 boss runs would be 1020 minutes. That's 17 hours of doing this. Thankfully, Boss Rush mode now gives you these figurines each time you complete a boss rush, which halves the time needed. The problem still stands. This one trophy is not hard, but was extremely dull and soul draining. I did it, so you don't have to. I convinced myself I was never going to get the platinum for Arcadegeddon. It had bested me in the worst possible ways. Bugged trophies, incredible grinds, and multiplayer-only trophies. However, with enough perseverance, stubbornness, and a stroke of luck, I managed to get the Arcadegeddon Platinum Trophy, ending this experience by opening my 500th treasure chest. Yes! Oh my god, I'm done with this game! Even after covering all the negative parts about Arcadegeddon, there is a part of me that respects the game for its creative and daring direction. I was really interested in this game because it gave different vibes, thanks to its aesthetic and punk attitude. It was a breath of fresh air, and I did appreciate that. It is a very different game for the better, and a very familiar game for the worse. The missteps in microtransactions, poor launch, clunky gameplay, dwindling player base, and awkward trophy list makes my verdict very easy. Avoid this game.
Best be running home to your mum. If you're lucky, you might get a lolly.